Workshop. Hello everybody. Hey Sean. Hi, I'm just filming you guys and want to thank you for these last, this is our 6th week, and we're talking about teaching as performance. We're sharing ideas for the classroom, integration ideas. I will, while we're waiting for Ms. Sheffy and Ashley, I'll begin by reflecting a little bit on teaching as performance. It's actually one of my favorite aspects of teaching is that it is a performance. When we think of a performance, when we think, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to perform at Carnegie Hall next month, what's the first thing that, or I'm going to have to perform in the classroom, I'm going to have to introduce this course and connect with my audience, which are the students. And there's more to that. It's not simply performer and audience. My model of the classroom is that we're all performers, and that I'm asking my students to perform, to role play. But when I say, you have a performance coming up, Vani, what comes to mind? And excitement is a wonderful thing. It's not simply something we say for the weekends. Something that brings excitement to your work is a very, very powerful tool. So you have a performance coming up. All right, I'm excited. Vani?
I guess normal feelings would be like nerves.
Nerves. So there's a little bit of nervousness. Why?
Just because, I mean, there are a multitude of reasons. You could be afraid that your audience isn't going to be as receptive.
Right.
You could be afraid that they're going to perceive you as something you don't want to be perceived as.
Right. Are they going to be? Are they going to be receptive? And what do we mean by receptive? Are they going to clap? Are they going to get it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of like, are you going to be able to engage them effectively? Because if it's something that you're very passionate about, you would obviously want to spread that to others. Or hopefully you would want to spread that to others.
That is really important, sharing your passion. All right, so you have a performance coming up. You're excited, but you're also a little bit nervous. What if the audience isn't receptive? What if they don't get it? How do I practice engagement? How do I engage the audience and share my passion in sort of a strategic way? Not just getting up here and saying, I just love playing drums. I'm so excited to play drums for you today. And actually some performers do that, right? Hey Baltimore, I'm so excited to be here, right? That's the sort of the fake sharing passion. What else? You have a performance coming up. Madia, you have a performance coming up. What crosses your mind? Rehearsals. That's the first thing that crosses my mind. Am I prepared? So, absolutely, rehearsals. I'm going to have to rehearse for this thing. And is there a method? So Vani was talking about for her class, she's going to go through the scientific method. Is there a method or strategy for rehearsals?
Yeah.
What is it?
I mean, it varies from person to person.
It varies from person to person in terms of effective preparation?
Yeah.
So rehearsals,
but I think
effective.
the full definition would be just practice as many times as you can.
Right? Practice, practice, practice. I don't know if practice makes perfect, but it certainly makes it better. So effective preparation, practice. But even more to that, like those of you who've done theater, or even a music piece, is your strategy to simply rehearse from beginning to end. And what I'm going to ask you next is, so we're making this little list, right? And then what I'm going to ask you is there any transfer here to the classroom? Like, as you think about an artistic performance or making that video, do we see any kind of transfer? How does this help our understanding of being an effective teacher? And again, not teacher as the sage on the stage necessarily, although part of that is helpful, right, to model performance for your students, but also in setting up. How do we set up valuable performing experiences for our students? Our students love to perform. When I led an after-school program, which was more of an informal education program, which means we weren't teaching the standards, which means we could be very creative about our curriculum, what was the students' favorite activity in the after-school program? Improv theater. And it was usually some kind of, the counselors would have a little huddle, and we'd say, today let's explore a scenario where new kid comes to school, and that new kid's being bullied by your friends. What do you do? It's kind of we set up dilemmas for them. But we made it funny. The new kid who comes to school and is being bullied is the biggest, baddest kid in the school, in the youth group, right? The bully is the littlest kid in the youth group. Hey, give me your lunch money. It's funny to see that the way we've cast them, and then the other students divide up into acting teams, and they flesh out how they're going to act the scenario. Getting back to Vani's method, we leave it blank. We leave the plot blank. We set up the scenario, leave the plot blank, and the students quote unquote solve the problem. And they have 3 teams, and they also got to contrast 3 different teams of actors and actresses came up with very different plots to explore that theme. So rehearsals, practice. What else? Now you're ready to perform? What about the space? What about the space you're performing in? Remember how each time we came, I'd like move the desks around or whatever?
Set up.
Hmm?
Set up.
Set up. All right, practice. Set up, because the way you set up the class influences the way we interact, right? The way that, is it a stage in the round? Is it a? Are we kind of, since we have a smaller group, I made a smaller circle, or do we group the desks, right? Do we want our students to kind of split up into teams? That sort of thing. Setup is incredibly important. One more thing, and then I want to think about how this thought that I'm going to perform somewhere then translates into how we think about the classroom. Anything else about, so you're performing, you're going to be performing. Actually, we're talking about, we had an overture today. Vani's vocal group, the Acapella Wooten, did this performance of Katie Tunstall, is that her name? The Scottish singer? They did a cover, it was really cool. Performance. And I thought about how often teaching and learning, not just being a teacher, can be a performance. Students sometimes hesitate to raise their hand because that answer in front of all their peers is a performance. And they're afraid of what? It's going to be a performance of their ignorance, right? I had a history teacher who used to say, when you got the answer wrong, he'd say, better to keep your mouth shut and feign ignorance than to open it and remove all doubt. He meant don't fake it. Don't fake the answer. If he calls on you, better to say, I don't know, than to say, well, actually, the Emperor Ferdinand was assassinated by a Yugoslav. Wrong, Okay, so your students are worried about performing in front of their peers, and they're worried about getting it wrong. How do you create a safe? In rehearsals, does the director, the person in charge, do they try to create a safe space so that you're not afraid of making mistakes? And how do they do that? Yeah.
Jessica McCullough. The whole point of rehearsal is to become more comfortable with your script, I guess. So in the classroom, the whole point with participation is to become more comfortable in that setting, like with your teacher and with your classmates, so that you do have that trust and support when you go into that specific classroom.
All right, comfort in the setting, trust and support. Depending on the age group, learning can be a traumatic thing, it can be an amazing thing, but it can be traumatic. All our lives we worry about getting it wrong. And part of the liberation of creativity, of taking an artistic, even if you're teaching a science class, to take an artistic or performance view, is that it gives you license to be creative in a supportive, respectful way, not to just totally blow your students away, but as you remember from your performing arts, or from sports even, how did your coach or director or teacher create a comfort in the setting you were in, that you trusted your coach, you trusted each other, you supported each other, so that you could create what Lev Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, right? We talked about that a little bit, where you have support. You want to challenge your students. You want to challenge their intuitive understandings, their frameworks that are coming in with it. It might just be plain wrong. You want to challenge them, but you can't only challenge them, as I talked about before. You need to support that learning. And then if you can get a balance of support and challenge, as well as group activities where they're seeing how they're seeing each other learn and answer, they're teaching each other, you get this, what he called a zone of proximal development. This margin, this extra margin of learning, you can leverage that them to learn more. We see that in team sports a lot. Erica.
When you were talking about like creating like the comfort in the setting and like the trust like within a team, one thing that like I've noticed, like this can also apply to like teaching also, but like in sports, it really helps. I feel like the team develops more of a trust and like comfort with the coach if the coach like does the not like drills, but like does the exercises with you. Like they're not just sitting there with a whistle like yelling at you. Like I had one soccer coach, like he would actually get out there and he would like run with you, and he made you like push you harder, like because if he beat you, then you would have to like run extra. Like, but I mean, he was out there running with you,
Yeah.
and he kept like doing stuff. It wasn't like he just sat there and like didn't do anything. Like,
I totally agree with you. I had a soccer coach who did every sprint with us. He had just graduated. He was the captain of the soccer team at Bates College, and I'll never forget. He did every sprint with us, and he was. It wasn't. We didn't have to beat him. He was always first. So he modeled this speed. We were like, oh my goodness, this guy's Superman. You know, I'm like whatever, 15 years old, and I'm thinking, wow, right? He modeled the behavior for us. Right? It wasn't just like the coach with the whistle.
And it goes into like, the draft. It's like it goes with the draft. Like if he supports you, but by running like faster than you, he's challenging you to like try to like keep up with him. So that's kind of like going with like how the draft works too.
Good one. Okay, this challenge to keep up, right? Funny.
I'm not quite sure what it is, but like sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone actually makes you a little bit more comfortable in it. So basically, one of the best directors that I ever had for any musicals that I've ever done was, he was my high school director throughout like freshman through junior year. And what he did basically was, we were doing, trying to remember, Aida. And he just handed me a script and he said, okay, you're on your own, just do your thing. So he gave me like 15 minutes to read the script before, or like the scene that we were doing. He gave me 15 minutes to read it. The rest of the people on stage 15 minutes to read it. And he turned out all the house lights, he turned on just the stage lights, and he was like, no, go.
Yeah.
And we were all very frustrated with him because that was the first time that he doesn't do that to freshmen. I was a sophomore at the time.
So there's an age thing here. The challenge in that, the Aida example felt like it was over here.
Yeah.
You felt like, oh my goodness, you're challenging. You just want me to, I only have 15 minutes to prepare and now I have to perform. It feels like the challenge is off the charts. But what did he do to bring it back towards support?
So essentially,
he knew at your age that you already had some chops, so to speak.
Yeah.
You had some training.
Yeah. So he said that the thing is that once you get on stage, you're on your own. I'm not going to be there to be able to like teach you how things are done. And most of acting and performing in general is like, it comes from the soul. Like it comes from what you feel. And I think that's very applicable to teaching as well. Because like we mentioned before, there's a factor of passion that's involved. So if you are passionate about the subject, then whatever performance you do with that will be coming from the soul, as it would be on stage, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. That intellect plus passion can result in memorable learning experiences that you may remember for the rest of your life. Right? I gave you the example of the Spanish folk song that I learned in 8th grade that I still remember, because it was more than just conjugation of verbs and all the grammar I was learning in Spanish. Here was sentence or lyrics in a foreign language plus melody, which for me was even better than learning the ABCs by melody. And I think you guys sang math equations one week, right? This, what's the melody of learning? Metaphorically speaking. That can add passion or emotion to a learning experience that becomes memorable. So That's great. So you see some of the, any other comments about transfer in terms of thinking about performing or being a member of a performing group and how that might create leverage or opportunities in the classroom? I can think of something, from this last semester, and that is, this is from the teacher's perspective. A quick 5-minute reflection on what I've learned in the classroom is that teaching a class that's an introduction to interdisciplinary studies, I can't possibly know it all. My job as a teacher is not to be the know-it-all. Right? My job as a teacher is to share what I find exciting. I choose, I find myself this summer, I'm sitting down with the course readings, and I'm asking myself, am I still interested in this case study? Am I still interested in this example, this example, this example? If the answer is no, I toss it and I say, what have I read about or experienced this year that I want to include in the class? Right? So I'm kind of getting rid of the dead wood and bringing in stuff that for me is vibrant. But I don't have a PhD in that case study necessarily. So I have to be ready to be wrong. We will make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are teachable moments. Our students, and I find this in the college classroom, my students ask me questions I can't, and I'll say, that's a great question, I don't know. How can we find out? And it becomes, I flip it around and say, if I say I don't know, in a sense, I'm kind of like the coach, if I frame it right, if I frame my response right. Some professors will shut you down and say, that's not a relevant question. I'm not going to answer that question. We need to move on. We've got a syllabus. We need to move on. Some professors will literally, well, not literally, metaphorically run with it. And they'll say, that is a great question. Okay? And here's the other thing, as I'm reframing my curriculum. I'm making sure every reading has a great research question attached to it. Right? So that when a student asks a question I can't answer, I'll say to that student, now you have a great research question. I don't know the answer to that. How would you find, so the running with, the coach running with the student is, this is a great question, let's run with this question and try to find an answer. You may not even be able to get started until the end of the semester. This may be your PhD thesis kind of question. Okay. What's the question? Those of you who have read, any of you like food? I don't know if any of you like food. Have any of you read Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma? It's about 3 different types of food systems in America. Very simple question that he begins the whole book with, and it is this: what should we have for dinner? Not what's for dinner, because that would be beef, of course. Right? Whatever. I'm making fun of that ad. What should we have for dinner? And then there's this 400-page book to answer that question, where he looks at the sort of the industrial organic system, the local pastoral organic system. He even tries to be a hunter-gatherer for a month, right? Where he just gathers mushrooms and tries to hunt animals and stuff. And he tries to figure out why we eat the way we do in America. Why there's this thing called high fructose corn syrup. Why 1/4 of all of the products in the supermarket are made of some derivative of corn. It's in your tater tots, it's in, I won't say everything, but it's in a lot of things. Okay? What should we have for dinner? So the coach, the analog of the coach running with us is getting your students to ask great questions. Because if they're curious, okay, this idea of curiosity genuine curiosity driving learning. Okay. What are we curious about? Whether we're in the sciences or the arts or the social sciences, we're often curious about, why do we behave the way we do? How did things get to be the way they are? Another book that has a great research question in the beginning is Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. Has anyone read this book? I think it won an award. He tells a story in the beginning of the book of doing field research in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and working with the tribal leader. His name is Yali, Y-A-L-I. And he's got all his measuring equipment. He's got his lab with him, right? And Yali walks into the lab and they had developed a friendship, right? He'd been there for months. And Yali says to him, "Hey, why is it you white people have so much cargo, and our people," meaning the natives of New Guinea, "have very little cargo?" And what he meant, and then Jared Diamond explains what he means by cargo. Why did you end up with all the technology, and we have very little technology? We live very simply. How did that end up? Is it a racial thing? What is it? And Jared Diamond takes 300, 400 pages to try to answer that question. But it's not a function of genetics. And I won't tell you what it is, but he starts to look at geography and climate patterns and the rise of agriculture supporting specializations. He goes back 13,000 years in human history to answer Yali's simple question, why is it some people, some races, have ended up with so much technology and other races haven't? I'm as smart as you, right? And he describes Yali's character. Yali is this charismatic leader of this tribe in New Guinea. Having great questions that drive our curiosity. And let's face it, some of my favorite works, whether it's poetry or theater, ask or portray, they raise issues in human behavior that we find intriguing. Right, I've quoted you. So to bring you up to speed with today, we had an overture. I sometimes use overtures in the classroom, meaning some kind of performance piece, music, theater, that gets us thinking about the assignment for the day. We're talking today about teaching as performance. I set up the camera and everyone kind of said, oh, I don't know if I want to be on camera. That's a performance. What if I do something dumb? Whatever. And I'm saying that doesn't matter. I'm not going to post it on YouTube. It's not like the world's going to see. But it's nice to be able to see yourself making a 5-minute presentation, right? And we talked about that, sports films, and the importance of feedback. Because teaching sometimes, as well as learning, is a performance. And what we did was we watched Vani's vocal group, the acapellas, performing, and we thought, okay, knowing that you have a performance coming up, what are some of the things you think about? Excitement, oh, I'm nervous, I need to rehearse in a methodical way, how do we do that? We need to set up, how do we set up the classroom or the space for optimal performance and collaboration? And how do we develop a comfort with the script? And what happens when our coach pushes us out of our comfort zone or really challenges us in this zone of proximal development? The AIDA example that Vani gave, wow, it seems like the coach or the director is challenging me too much. This is beyond my abilities. And yet, the coach or the teacher knows you're capable, and we make some age-appropriate decisions. We know that you might not want to do this with junior high school kids. They need more structure. So how much support, how much challenge, and bottom line, all of this stuff doesn't matter if you don't know your students, right? If you don't know where they are, how they learn. We talked a little bit about multiple intelligences. So really, bringing it back around to like a multiple intelligences approach is why we're here today. Is if we're going to ask our students to perform something or do something in the classroom, then what are some interesting ideas? You will present this morning, but we'll brainstorm together. So even though it kind of feels like you're up here alone, you're leading a brainstorming session about, hey, I want to try this thing in the classroom. So think of it that way this morning, okay? Any other comments or questions about this transfer of performance ideas for teachers and students? Good discussion, I think that's great. I'll take like a little photograph of the board. So we have this space. We've been talking for the past 5 weeks or so about different examples of integration into the science classroom. What did Brian Dempsey do, the biology teacher? He had a teaching problem which his students were not representing what they were seeing under the microscope or in nature. So he did what?
He incorporated drawing, like them actually drawing the art pictures, the detail of what they saw.
But did he incorporate, so great idea, let's incorporate drawing. This is a man. Was that the drawing lesson? What was it? That's a stereotype of drawing, right? And that was the problem. His students were drawing, and many of us do this, they were thinking from iconic images in their brain, right? And those iconic images were supplanting or displacing what they were trying, the details of what they needed to represent, to draw, to diagram, so that they could understand the difference between different biological functionalities, like wind pollination and insect pollination is the example that Brian gave. So he had a learning challenge in the classroom and used visual art, rigorous visual art, 6 different techniques that visual artists use to create almost like a 3D, to get detail down, to interrupt the icon and really draw what you're seeing. You know, looking at an image but not your hand and drawing like this way, that kind of stuff. So that's one example. If you remember from Between the Folds, why was the math teacher in Massachusetts using origami in the classroom? What was origami helping his students to do? Let's say you're teaching geometry, right? Remember that? What were any of the scientists doing with the art form of origami that helped increase their understanding of protein folding or whatever? What was the utility of talking about origami, which seems like a huge diversion? Why are we learning to fold paper when we need to learn, mathematical equations? Why? What was the added value of that integration? Yes, Jessica.
Was it more of, well, I guess with the physical aspect, with geometry, you learn about like the dimensions of, you fold the paper this way, it turns into like a different thing. Hold on, I just had my thought. Well, I know with the science part of it, he said you actually change the memory of the paper.
Right, Dr. Eric Domain. Very simple statement he makes. I love it. He says, when you fold a piece of paper, you essentially do what to that piece of paper?
Change its memory.
Okay, does one go back to being a perfectly flat surface? No. That observation is the beginning of all of his research in computational origami. Can we create mathematical algorithms to predict? Do you remember we did that flat surface exercise online? You see the fold pattern, what does it make? And he does that mathematically, and he does these computational origami, so he comes up with computer programs. Are you going to share a computer lesson with us today? Great, okay. My sense, and feel free to debate this with me, my sense is that origami, folding paper in a geometry classroom, gives you a sense of the experiential, okay? If I can spell it correctly. Spell check.
Yeah.
What's the importance of experience in the classroom? Why does the freshman honors biology teacher send students out into the forest, into their, out into the field, when you could just look at, there are lots of pictures in the 1,400-page Campbell biology book. Why not just look at pictures and, memorize structures? And Vonnie, you have something to say.
I think a lot of that has to do with association and...
Good. It's a good word.
Trying to articulate. Association, just like hands-on experience. Because I feel like you can easily memorize the structure of a leaf, but you're not gonna like remember exactly the structure of like the cross section of a membrane unless you can like rip apart a leaf and see that there is something in there that's not just green.
Absolutely. Right. So what happens with the multi-sensory approach, you have a leaf in your hand, it smells a certain way, you can articulate, you can rip it, you can do a cross-sectional analysis by tearing it.
You can't really see the cross-section, but I mean, you can see there's something in there.
There's something in there, right? Well, if you tear open an aloe,
Yeah.
something happens, right? It oozes out, and wow, my burn suddenly feels better, right? There's this multi-sensory experience that you can't get in a two-dimensional, looking at an image on a page. I think I had said before, my favorite professor in graduate school, who was an aesthetic philosopher, said that one of the things that experience or the arts do is help us to see right? And this goes back to Brian's problem too. So much of our looking is overlooking, right? What color shoes am I wearing today? I've been walking around up here.
Right, yeah.
Nice, okay? But that's not a question you thought I was going to ask you today. What do you think of my shoes, right? That's not important to our data input, right? We're like, why did he ask me that? That's not what we're here for today. So much of our looking is overlooking. That designing integrative experiences in the classroom, experiences, that gives a sense of 3D or touch or smell, can be memorable and can actually get students asking better questions and not simply stay in a theoretical or abstract state of learning. Okay, nice job with the analysis of teaching and learning. This should say teaching and learning as performance. Because let's face it, there's a big difference when I say to my students in my writing intensive course, next week you're each going to read out loud to the class the essay you wrote. Big difference in the quality of the essays. I've done both. Now just hand them in to me. You write it out the night before. You're going to perform it for the class. They start going through all this stuff that we talked about. You're going to perform your own writing for the class. They're a little bit excited, they're a little bit nervous. Now they start preparing sooner. They have a draft. They read it to their friend. What do you think of this? It's confusing. Why? Right? They could critique it before it's performed. That's a powerful tool in the classroom. Okay, enough. So that's our intro, and that's also kind of a summary of some of the themes we've talked about over the past few weeks. Right? Multiple intelligences, arts integration. Okay. So who would like to go first and share a lesson idea? Please come up here. Use the Blackboard if you want. If you have a web reference or whatever, that's fine too.